Yo, what is up, guys? I'm bringing you a brand new video, and today I'm going to be going over the mechanics as well as general strategies for the Deposed Crown Prince in hard mode. We are currently the only team here that has ever completed it in North America, and I wanted to give you guys some tips and tricks and things you should be thinking about when you are trying to kill this boss. And I'm going to be playing the raw footage of the first ever kill completion that we've done and show you guys everything that I was sort of thinking about as the video plays through. So that way there you can get an idea of what the main thing you should be worried about is. But before starting the boss, you basically want to make sure that you're choosing all Earth auras. Earth is going to give you 6 total chances at dying and still being able to resurrect, which is really, really nice because sometimes mistakes do happen despite even the cleanest runs. I think we lost 2 people in this clear in total, but in previous clears, like the last couple clears that I've done with my team, there was sometimes like the last one where we lost all 6 lives. So having the extra lives is really, really helpful because this is more of a sustained fight than it is a bursty, try to rush your way to the end type of fight. And that can be seen as a result of the actual elixirs that we're using. So notice on my buff bar, I actually have a magical frenzy draft running, and that is because this fight typically is going to last longer than 15 minutes. So using harmony drafts is not really ideal. It's better to be using magical drafts. But starting out, this boss has basic mechanics that stun as well as do a lot of damage per attack. And that can be very, very devastating if you get stunned and then ultimately combo stunned to certain death. So if you ever do get CC'd at the very starting animation of any of his attacks, it's probably suggested that you V. Otherwise, you could be put in a situation where it's just going to end up killing you and it's not worth the life because, you know, the lives are precious and you're going to lose your buffs. But the starting main mechanic after you DPS him down the first 15% is going to be this phase here. He's essentially going to clone himself into 5 different abilities, and I'm going to pause the video here for a little bit of further explanation. So you'll notice here that there are 5 different moons. You need to kill these moons in order of the rightmost crescent, and then the right half moon, the full moon, the left half moon, and then the left crescent moon. So you're essentially killing it in order. The way that we have this designed is when you are starting this particular phase, you want to make sure that you have all of your 5 players standing sort of in the shape of a star, such that these mobs are going to face outwards, because you're going to notice that there's going to be this big slash that all the mobs do. When that slash occurs, it's going to just one-shot you. So if you have everybody directing it outwards, it's going to be really, really helpful in order to keep everybody alive. And another unique thing that we do, which you'll notice if I back up here in the video, is since these have to be killed in order, it's way better if you have your highest DPS player start on the first moon that needs to be killed. So you'll notice that me and our ranger will actually switch here, and the ranger is going to go on the first moon that needs to die. I'm going to be on whatever other moon that that particular player had, because it's just better if he can kill it faster and then go help all the other players who are DPSing their moons down simultaneously. You also want to make sure that you are standing sort of in your own little quadrant and not cross-contaminating the mobs, because these things do big damage, and if they stun you and you get hit twice, you can die almost immediately. You can see here that I have my moon down to really low HP, and I'm just sort of waiting for the other people to finish killing all the full moons and stuff like that, such that we can finally finish my moon. You do not want to kill it out of order, else you will just full-on party wipe. Another thing that is worth noting is once all the moons are down, you want to make sure that you're going in the very, very middle, and then there's a bit of a DPS check. If you can't DPS him hard enough, he will ultimately end up standing up, and you're going to lose out on phasing him into the next phase as efficiently as you can. So now that all the other moons have been killed in the order that they were supposed to be, we can finally finish off killing, and then we go into the middle where there is a little bit of a DPS check. So you notice that he sort of kneels down to the ground. We do some damage to him. He's going to now flop over onto the ground. You get a little bit of down attack damage. Now, something that happens during this phase and throughout pretty much the entire fight is, see this little circle that appears? If you get caught in that circle, you'll fly up in the air. As you can see, we'll actually go back there since it was a little bit quick. But you'll notice that if you happen to accidentally get caught by that moon bounce, what has to happen is you have to stand underneath the player that got caught by that bounce. So you'll notice that that player right there gets stuck in the air and somebody has to stand underneath him. So I didn't stand under, I just said the ranger do it, and that will free them and put them down to the ground. They won't actually get to come down to the ground unless you help them from the moon bounce. And that particular moon bounce thing is going to happen throughout the entirety of the fight. So once you do that DPS phase, so notice there's another moon bounce, you need to go inside. Sometimes it's on the, sometimes you have to go outside, sometimes you have to go inside. Another common mechanic from this fight is these arrows will fall from the sky. So you'll notice that these arrows are just sort of moving in a counterclockwise position, and there's also moon bounces. So you have to be very situationally aware of where it is that you're standing. This mechanic right here happens at about 30%, and you have to stand on the very outside of the arena. He's going to do an attack, you then have to stand on the inside. He's then going to do an attack, you stand on the outside again, he does another attack, and that's going to be it. And that happens at 30%. So while you're DPSing the boss, you need to avoid the moon bounces, you need to avoid the arrows, and then he does that one specific mechanic. Now, there's another mechanic here that he's doing. When he says that traveler, you disappoint me, what he's going to do is he's going to jump up into the air and land 3 separate times. It will fully kill you if you are not in the middle of your PvE iframe, but you can also just do burst movement right as he's about to land in order to not rely on that iframe. And anytime he goes outside of in the shadowy border of the area, he's going to do that traveler, you disappoint me mechanic, which is basically just a lot of danger, especially for your shy. So what we did there was we stood far away such that the jumping would only occur on 2 of our players rather than any of the 5, and it makes it a lot more consistent in order to stay alive during that phase, because Shy's PvI frame is not as reliable and he can't move quite as quickly as everybody else. So when the mob is standing outside in the shadow of the boundary, you want to make sure that you essentially run to the other side of the arena and just have 2 people that are very confident in being able to PvI frame or just burst move right when he's about to land, such that you don't die, and the Shy should not be one of those players. And anytime he goes outside of that region, he's going to do it, or anytime he says traveler, you disappoint me, he's going to do it. So the first phase is rather basic. He's going to do his attacks, you're going to have to dodge the moon bounces, you're going to have to dodge the arrows, and you're going to have to watch out for those 2 separate mechanics. So the traveler, you disappoint me, where he jumps in the air, or the outer, inner, outer, as we like to call it, where you have to dodge those red circles that we saw. So at the start of phase 2, there's going to be these red rings that are going to, you want to start in the middle of the arena, and then they're going to pulsate out into the middle of the, from the middle outwards after they go into the middle. So all you have to do is just PvI frame. You just start in the middle, you PvI frame all the way out to the edge, and then you PvI frame back in while avoiding these particular little moon bounce things. And the start of this phase is super, super basic. All you really are doing is DPSing, you're avoiding the moon bounce, and you're avoiding those initial red rings. Those red rings will nearly one-shot you. In some cases, they will one-shot you. Now, when he says it's time to end this, you're going to see the arrows start falling from the sky again. Something to mention about these arrows that fall from the sky is that they always, except in one instance, will always start in the same spot every single time. So if you are safe, you can just start PvE framing whenever you want. But whenever you are in a safe space, then you can basically always assume that that space is going to be safe whenever it says something about traveler, you disappoint me, or it's time to end this, or whatever. Like when he says, now it's time to end this, that's when the arrows come back. So you notice that earlier on, he did another traveler, you disappoint me. So during this particular animation here, when that animation occurs, where it says a chilling light, what that means is all players need to stop DPSing the mob and need to stand behind him. If you continue DPSing the mob, what's going to happen is it's going to do a rounded attack and kill everybody in the arena. But if he doesn't get attacked, he'll just do a half slash and everybody behind him will be fine. So at the 60% phase, what's going to happen here is you need to split up your team. So I'm going to pause here. So we have 3 players, and then there's 2 players on the polar opposite side of the arena. So this is the main entryway. This over here would be the King's Palace. You want to stand in this particular half of the arena, because what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a safe area, in this small little area where you can stand, there's going to be another safe area in that small area that you can stand. And what needs to happen is you as a team need to DPS 2 moon halves before they reach the middle. So the divided moon is going to be on both sides. You need to have 2 of your highest DPS players on one side and then 3 on the other. You kill the divided moon, and then from here, the arrows are going to start falling from the sky shortly after you kill the moons, or maybe even during, depending on how long it takes you to kill the moon. But the arrows themselves will start in not the correct position. So see how these arrows landed right here? These normally land right here. So they kind of just are somehow, they're just a little off during this phase. But whenever arrows re-land, typically during any other time in this fight, they'll always land on this side of the arena when you're standing with your back to the entrance. Whenever you're standing with your back to the palace, then you can stand on this side because, you know, that's just how it kind of works. So if you don't want to worry about like where the arrows will fall, you don't need to be too complicated with that. But just for like expert future proofing of it, you can reliably stand here whenever you are finishing the moon half phase. Otherwise, you'd reliably have to stand here during any other time the arrows are returning if you're on this side. And then the opposite occurs over here. You can basically just stand over here on the very opposite side of the map during normal phases, or you want to stand, well, you could also stand there anyway during that phase too. So that is at the 60% mark on phase 2. So moving on to just like some general mechanics here. The arrows themselves can one-shot you, so you need to make sure you iframe through them. And it's not worth being very, it's not worth getting and risking your health. Notice how I went to go get a heal orb there. If you end up getting hit, you can get hit for 60% of your life in one single auto attack. And it's not worth just risking your HP. So during the 50% phase, it's going to drop another red ring here of a bunch of meteors. I recommend that you stand on either the entrance side or the palace side, and you basically just iframe your way through the arrows. And see, you can't even rely on your PV iframe sometime, so you want to spend as little time in the danger zone as like physically possible. But you basically just iframe through everything there until it goes away. So right around that 50% mark, you want to be really thinking about your stamina so that you have a lot of access to stamina in case you need it. So you'll notice that right now he's outside the arena, so he's going to say, "Traveler, you disappoint me." That's a common thing, so that means that we need to go away because he's going to start teleporting. That's what we call it, but he's just jumping. So notice how I can completely avoid, by using a burst movement skill right when he's about to land, I can completely avoid him landing on me and not have to rely on my PVI frame, which, as you can see, can be inconsistent sometimes. And that way there, it keeps you a little bit safer during that mechanic. So now the only other thing that he's going to be doing here is he's going to be doing another one of those outer, inner, outer mechanics. And that's going to happen right around this 30% mark. So we're just going to continue DPSing the boss down. And you'll notice that we haven't had any sort of moon bouncing happen. The moon is no longer in the sky because we killed the moon. It's split in half, so it's gone. So whenever he says, "How long have I hidden myself?" you always stand on the outside, on the outer, and then he'll do the attack on the inside. You go in, and then he'll do the attack on the outside. So you go out, he does the attack on the inside, and he can do another attack. So after the third attack, it's consistent for all 3 of the first attacks, but then after that, he can do up to 2 additional or 1 additional attack or none. So you just have to be on your toes during that last particular phase. So once you can see that the moon has now returned to the sky. So now we have arrows that are dropping as well as we have the moon bouncing that can occur. The moon bounce will happen always when the moon is full. So notice that the moon is starting to fill up in the sky there. It's getting fuller, it's getting fuller. You can't see it anymore, but once it gets full, it'll do the moon bounce. And you really want to avoid getting hit by that because it's almost nearly a death sentence practically always. But from here, you just continue to do damage. And as you can see, like having a ranged character is really helpful because you can get hit really, really hard. So at the 10% mark, he's going to say, "You challenge me with such feeble strength." He's just going to do another one of these little red ring things. So once the moon bounce occurs, you basically just stand in the middle and then you iframe all the way out to the end. And then it's going to do another wave coming back outwards. And then from there, you just continue DPSing the boss. And that is basically it for this phase. He'll continue to do little moon bounces. And similar, well, I should say dissimilar to any other hard mode boss, this boss actually has 3 phases instead of 2. So it's actually a little bit more difficult than normal boss fights. So we finish out this in 10 minutes and 41 seconds, and we're starting up in phase 3. So in phase 3, we really haven't seen anything too new, I would say, in phase 2. The only thing that was different about phase 2 is it added in those little red ring meteor things, as well as the moon splitting. This phase has one big attack right here at the start, and sometimes it's not at the start, sometimes it's throughout the fight, but he basically will say that voice line. So if we scroll back to what he said, so you can see in the voice line, I will place everyone in this world under my feet. When that happens, you want to be behind him and a decent amount behind him, because you'll notice that the AoE actually does extend behind him a little bit, or you have to time your PvE frame, which is not recommended. I was actually in a lot of danger there, given that it can be very Okay, so he's doing the chilling blade thing, which means that we can make sure to stand behind him and stop DPSing him. We have to care for the moon bounces. Now, something that happens with those moon bounces throughout this fight is they are occurring much more frequently on phase 3. So you'll notice that every like 7 or 8 seconds even, you're going to get a moon bounce. So that's something that you're going to constantly have to micromanage throughout the fight. So he says, how long have I hidden myself? Whenever that happens, that's another outer, inner, outer mechanic. So you need to stand on the outside. And this is another one of those ones that can happen where he will do up to 5 and potentially only 4 with a repeat after the third, and then the fourth one will be a repeat. So now he says, travel, you disappoint me. This means he's going to be jumping. And this particular phase, it gets a lot less scary when he's jumping at the start of phase 3, because essentially there's no arrows to be worrying about that are falling. So it's pretty simple to just run away from that particular mechanic. So the moon bouncing is going to continue to occur, and he's going to continue to just require DPS here all the way up until really 50%. So you basically just continue to DPS, you continue to avoid the moons, and you just get used to having to constantly dodge and constantly damage, and trying not to stand in front of his damage, because that is typically when the CCs are going to occur. He also, during his basic attacks, he's also going to CC behind him too. So it can be rather scary to be standing anywhere in front or behind him, but standing beside him is always going to be the most safe. So we're about to see a new mechanic here at 50%. And this mechanic is probably the holy mechanic that is going to make most teams just fail, because it's very, very difficult. So what's going to happen here is you're going to have the moon bouncing that happens on the outside and the inside, but he's also going to do the traveler jumps and create a brand new moon bounce separate to the global mechanic. So every time he jumps, he just created a new moon bounce. And then there was the global map moon bounce. Then that's the moon bounce he created. Then there's a global moon bounce as well as one that he created. And then you can see he created that moon bounce, and then there's the global moon bounce. And then from there, he created that moon bounce, and then there's the global moon bounce. So you can see that you basically have to, in a sense, freestyle your way around the arena. Typically, you want to stay as close to your team as you possibly can, and you kind of want to ride the line of where the global moon bounce does occur, such that you're going to be able to dodge the global moon bounce and his particular moon bounce that can be an inner moon bounce or an outer moon bounce. But as long as you're standing in the areas that there is no white overlay on the bottom of on the floor, essentially, you're going to be okay. So at 30%, he's going to bring back the lightning. And the only other mechanic that he's going to do here that we have already seen before is another one of those outer inner outers that's going to occur. So the complexity of this fight here and now is that the moon bounces are happening much more often. The arrows are now back, and then he's going to do an outer inner outer here at anywhere between 10 to about 40%. So he does another chilling blade strike so we don't DPS him. He slashes half the arena so we can start DPSing him again. And you can see that there's a lot of movement that is required. So when he says, how long have I hidden myself? You stand on the outside, and he's going to do an attack on the middle. Then you go on the inside. And remember, he can do up to 3 total or potentially 4 or 5 attacks here. So he did 3. And so now you can continue DPSing. Now, the only final mechanic here that's about to occur, and this is something that we've lost a lot. Like we have lost plenty of times when practicing this. This is about to be the hardest part of this boss fight. Is he's going to do the 50% mechanic, but there's also going to be arrows. And not only that, you need to do a DPS phase to knock him on the ground, similar to what we saw in phase 1. So you can see that we need to constantly be worried about dodging arrows, constantly dodging these moon bounces, and not standing in the area, while also dodging his big attacks. So we're thinking about iframing whenever he lands, such that we're going to avoid getting hit. You can see there, I actually made a mistake and I consumed my rage. I nearly died for it, but you want to be able to iframe that. Now he goes onto the ground after the 6th jump, and you need to DPS him down while avoiding the arrows, and DPS him down while avoiding the moon bounces that can be outer or inner. Once he gets flopped onto the ground, you just DPS him down, you kill him, and the fight is over. Now, something important about this particular last 5% is that if you don't manage to get the damage phase, and he doesn't flop onto the ground, so during that particular damaging phase, he doesn't actually really take damage because he has a big DP buff. Only after he flops onto the ground, after you complete the DPS check, will he actually be damageable. And so what's important to do there is get the damage out, but do it in such a way that it's safe, because the worst case scenario is if you don't get that DPS check, you just have to go through that jumping phase again. He'll jump 6 more times, he'll do the moon bounces again, and then you have another chance at it. So it's not worth getting moon bounced. Moon bounces are like the holy killers of this entire thing. It's very easy to avoid the arrows. It's very, very easy for the most part to avoid his attacks, just knowing that he attacked in front of him and behind him and very rarely to the side. And overall, as long as you can avoid getting stiffened by his attacks and just one shot by the arrows, the moon bounces are the ultimate killer of this particular thing. And that's why it's so dangerous in that last 5%, is because it starts to become a big stamina problem. So right at that particular moment, right before that 5%, it's highly recommended that you start getting buffed up right before he's about to tip over to that 5%. So you got your shy buffs, you got your Z buff up, you got your E buff up, so you're ready to do damage and care for the moon. It's never worth getting hit by a moon to push damage. It's always better to just DPS as safely as you can, as well as just being okay with failing that DPS check and just starting over again with the 6 jumps and then trying again a little bit more. Trying again on the next try, on the next jump phase. So another thing that's really important about this last 5% is notice where we have him land. So see how me and the shy and everybody else, we're standing kind of on this edge where the moon bounce typically occurs. The reason for that is it gives us an outlet to be able to DPS the boss no matter whether it does an inner or an outer moon bounce in the last DPS phase. So see how he's kind of in the general area of where, okay, so the moon bounce is going to be, in this case, it's on the outside, so we have the ability to DPS him. But then you'll notice that in the middle of the DPS phase, he's going to do an inside one, right? So by having him sort of somewhat close to this particular border after his last jump, and that's just important that everybody's positioning there, you can go on the outside and still have access to be able to DPS him and not have to just, wipe the run essentially by getting moon bounced. So that is everything that you need to know about killing the boss. Those are the main tips and tricks. And something that I will say is that you guys really should not be discouraged by failing this boss over and over and over again. The hardest part of this boss is very easily that 50% mechanic and that 5% mechanic, and the only way to practice that is to get to them. There is no practice mode in this boss fight, so getting good at doing that is going to increase the success of your runs tremendously. The first time it took us like probably 10 or 15 hours to get our first kill. The second time it might have taken us another 10 hours to get a second kill. Our third kill, we got it in the first try. So once you start to get used to this fight, you start to understand and just like kind of naturally know the timings of the arrows, you naturally know the timing of the moon bounces, you naturally have your strategies involved, and you know how everybody's kind of going to move around during those 50% and 5% phases. It's really, really, really going to assist you in getting the boss done. And I wouldn't be discouraged if your first and second kill take a lot of time, because the third kill or the fourth kill could end up being way, way easier. And you need to think about not just getting a kill, but getting your strategy down with your team such that you can consistently get 20 kills, because that's what's going to be required for the title. If you want to get the Deposed Crown Prince red title, you need to kill it 20 times. So it's not about the small mistakes that you make along the way or the little bit of time you might save doing something else. It's really about the consistency to know, hey, these are the things that you need to think about that could wipe your run. And if a small mistake is made, don't dwell on it. It might cost a life, but it's important to get to that third phase 50% to practice that mechanic as much as you can. And that's something I think that our team might have done differently as we were practicing, is a lot of the time, every time we'd like lose a life or two on the first two phases, we would just reset. But practicing that 50% mechanic and that 5% mechanic is everything at the end of the day. Those are the two hardest parts of the fight, because there's so many different moon bounces that are occurring that finding that little sliver of safety is really, really tough, and you just can't iframe the moon bounce. If you're in the range of where it's going to bounce you, you can't iframe it, you're done. And if you, by the time somebody saves you, the arrows come along, it'll kill you. It's just not really it's not sustainable to get hit at all, and that only comes with practice. So overall, I hope this was very, very informative. I hope this gives you everything you need to know about killing Deposed Crown Prince in hard mode. I wish you all the best of luck if you do plan to go for it. I personally love this kind of mechanic. I love these kind of difficult bosses. I was amongst the first team in North America to kill Sakrakia on Elvia mode. I was the first team to do Yolu on Elvia mode, and now the first team to do Deposed Crown Prince in hard mode. So I really love this kind of difficult PvE, and I hope that that love and passion is something that you guys find as well, because I genuinely look forward to doing this kind of tough stuff rather than just running around in a circle and PvEing, or just standing at a tower and DPSing mobs. Like, this requires active thought. It requires the honing of timing and skill in order to complete these fights, and I hope that's something that you guys are going to be interested in doing too. So that's why I wanted to make this guide. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Peace.